Hey, this is Matt. Once again, welcome back to another videos. Another paid request, this time from Toby. Thank you so much for those interested in requesting any type of videos. Feel free to send it either directly to my PayPal or join my Patreon. Both links are down below in the info box. And this is for NY77, The Coolest Year in Hell, which you can find for free on YouTube. It is a 2007 documentary that was on VH1. And it talks about that summer of New York where you had the Summer of Sam, Son of Sam killings, the 44 caliber killer. You had the blackout that lasted a few nights and caused a lot of riots and stuff being stolen. The Bronx pretty much burning down. And just how it was a lot of sleaze and pimps and hookers. The 25-hour blackout. I said multiple, but I think it was like 25-hour blackout. And just how dire straits New York was, and the political public perception and all that stuff. I thought that was pretty interesting. They have a lot of old footage from back in the day. The talking heads they have is people like Geraldo. Now the reason it's on VH1 is they mentioned that despite all that, it was a premier source of evolution of music. Hip-hop, bit of disco, and punk. So especially hip-hop and punk. And how the rise of that really were created amongst all this strife. Probably because when you don't have anything, what you don't have? Your imagination, your creativity, and that's going to shine a lot more. And granted, when it was talking about the actual stuff going on, like the blackouts and the Son of Sam and like the mayor, how people didn't like him, and then this other lady, Bella, was going up in the ranks and showing like interviews from people who were alive back then. That was very interesting. I would say sometimes more interesting than the music portion. But that was still somewhat interesting as well. And of the people interviewed, like I said, a lot of people were there back in the day. They do interview Jimmy Breslin, who's the journalist that would get some of the letters from the Son of Sam. Geraldo Rivera, which has been forever since I've seen that guy. I mean, granted, this is 2007, but I do remember the Geraldo talk show. So, and then what was it, the Al Capone vault? That there was nothing in it. Definitely shot himself in the foot in that. So it was kind of cool to see him there. And this is pretty entertaining. It was fascinating. It was interesting. Good wealth of info. If you like to hear more about this time period, or you're a guy from New York or anything of the sort, I definitely recommend this. It's called NY77, The Coolest Year in Hell. It's only an hour and 20-some minutes long. It goes by a very fast pace. And like I said from the beginning, it kind of sets you up where, again, the blackout with the looting, and there's the Summer of Sam, and you see real footage of the Bronx literally like burning down, and how entire neighborhoods are just a wasteland, like it was a post-apocalyptic movie. And 5,000 cops were laid off. But again, amongst all this strife, hip hop, disco, and punk blew up. Schools, they had not much for a fiscal year, so the music departments were abandoned. So it's like, well, you gotta think about it. In this time period, you don't have internet. Take that out of the equation. No computer stuff. Not really much of video game stuff, so take all that out. You don't have cell phones, so you take all that out. TV, maybe you get a couple channels. So it's not a whole lot to watch on that. So what else you don't do? You can't find a job, or you're a kid. Music. And it tells about how a lot of people want to be DJs, and they talk with this guy, Grandmaster Kaz, him and his buddy. I did like this. they would get their equipment and they get like a street lamp and they would try to get their equipment to the street lamp and do all these little things so they could get power for the street lamp for their DJ crew and their music so people could be dancing and having fun in the streets or in particular at the park. It's like we'd have to have all these plug-ins to plug one after the other to get into the park. And the cops didn't care because they had a lot more to deal with, which is true because they talk about that, then they also talk about how things were, how it was very much more crime-ridden, how there's a lot more gangs, how there was garbage on the streets, how there's a lot more sleazy and grimy, the porno theaters. They even talked with a porn actress that talked about how things were back in the day and how if you need to see that, you have to see on the big screen. And some guy mentions, yeah, there'd be people watch it and they would stand up and applause after each sex scene. And they talked a bit about the mayor not being very popular because a lot of people look down on the city and go, man, this used to be such a great place, but now it's a cesspool and you're not doing anything about it. So there's other people like this lady named Bella who had this unique hat. They're trying to get more public opinion to be elected over this guy. And once I would talk about these specific places, where in the Bronx or wherever, that were a centerpiece of music to rise. Whether it be like CBGB, among other places, like this place, hip hop was rising up. This place, punk rock was rising up. And you have people like the Ramones and Blondie and the Talking Heads come out of the woodwork. Sorry about that. And just this new expression of music being showcased. Because like I said, when you don't have anything left, all you have is your imagination, and that creates much more creativity, so let's try some different things. And like this one club, it's like, listen, you can play here, you just have to write your own music. Because a lot of people doing covers, no, you write your own music. Grandmaster Caz, they were talking about. What's interesting about him is that anytime he talked, a lot of times you would hear the chains because he had so many chains on him. It kind of reminded me of that joke in I'm Going to Get You Sucker, where people overdose on gold chains. But he told a few fun stories. This one bit where there's a hip hop battle between him and what was it? Not Batista. That's the wrestler, but Batista. I can't remember the guy's name. But the guy's like has a sound system, and the beat he was using is Queen. That doom 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 doom. We will rock you theme doom doom doom. And then the other guy's like, we can't hear you. He bumps up doom doom doom. Doom, doom, doom. Hey, I said we can't hear you. So he tries to up more. Listen, dude. No, we can't hear you. This is how it's supposed to sound like. And then the guy ratchets his up and it's like, doo, 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 doo. And just how the guy's like, well, I lost on that one. Again, some fun stories of that. And for a short amount of time, like, they go through the whole circuit. They go through like Studio 54. They go through the swinger circuit where couples wanted to meet and mess around, and there'd be places where like 100 couples would be there swapping back and forth. From time to time, they talk about when another killing had happened from the 44 caliber killer, and how people were scared and paranoid, and we wanted to go out there and find the guy. Whenever they talk about Studio 54 or some other stuff, there's this one lady, I forget her name, but she reminded me of a female Guillermo del Toro. I say that because when you listen to Guillermo del Toro's interviews, he has a certain cadence to how he talks. And because of his background and ethnicity, this lady has the same. It's like if Guillermo del Toro was a female, would sound just like this lady. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, just something I noticed while watching it. They do talk about the blackout. That was some interesting stories, like the porn actress, or the hooker, I guess, is like, well, I was in the middle of a blowjob with a client. Apparently, lightning had hit a transmission tower and lines that was connected to the Indian Point, which is where a lot of the power was coming into New York. And then also, there was a lot of power being used already because of the heat wave. And then that made this like 25 or so hour blackout. And just the riots, and like one of the guys like, well, I could talk about this right now. I went in and got something for my DJ stuff. That's the only thing I got. And like people mention how, and I like that they put a lot of old footage. A lot of old footage from back in the day. Old, TV footage, news footage, footage of how things looked back in the day. You know, the mayor being questioned by a guy said, "Yeah, a cop told me to just watch. I saw people walk out with my stuff. The cop told me stand back and watch because they didn't want me to get hurt. But they just stood there and watched these guys take my stuff from my store." Which is true. And they do talk to a cop. They do talk to a cop. It's like, we saw that there were hundreds and hundreds of people, maybe like thousands of people. It's like, well, what do we can't arrest all of them. Just get a couple people, put them in a car, and we'll try to see if we could. Because, I mean, you try to think, like, what could a cop do at that point? I mean, nowadays, you could record all of them and check their name and or find who they are and have video footage and find out their identity and said, listen, you were there and you're carrying this piece of equipment. So nowadays, to be fair, a few years ago there were riots and there are people that stole stuff, and I don't know if they got punished. So maybe things haven't changed as much as I think about. So maybe nothing has changed much. But nowadays, I'd be more mad about it. Like, you can do something. We have the technology, the equipment. Like, you can do something now. Back then, bit of a harder thing to deal with. And then the police, people were just way in over their head, and this was just a complete, utter cesspool in a way. And I know there are some people in the documentary that missed that time period, and maybe nostalgia, or because they had a good time, because hey, they got stuff for free in this riot, and they got to play music, and, it was like the Wild West. But let's be honest, it's not better then. No, that's not a better time. In terms of that kind of living condition, where people can't find jobs, and people are homeless, and people, I mean, they're still that way now, but not nearly as bad as back then. And how crime, look over your shoulders all the time. And I'm not saying cities are great now, but it's nice to look at in terms of a movie setting, or you look at movies back to the day. But to live there in reality, it would seem much more dangerous, much more dirty, dry. It seemed like things, it may not look as cool, and it may not be as neat or as atmospheric or as character filled, but it didn't clean up was for the better service to people. Now, granted, it was such a short documentary, I kind of wish this was a bit longer. I don't know if I say a miniseries, but there's a lot of stuff I would like to have heard even more of. Like, they do a section on graffiti, writing, the murals. I kind of wish we heard more about that. Like you hear a little bit of it, and some people would sign their name and underline it. And Geraldo makes an interesting point how it was a detriment because if you went to a subway and you saw graffiti, you'd be scared and paranoid because you didn't know if that was a ding, what was going on, what was the reason behind these graffiti. Was this a warning of don't come in here or I'll get stabbed or I get robbed? So people are more paranoid. People are more paranoid, then they're more dangerous. If they're more dangerous, then a lot of bad stuff could happen. They show what happened with the Son of Sam, that a parking ticket led to the Son of Sam getting arrested, which is interesting. I mean, I knew that before, but it's still an interesting bit that that simple thing is what caught this killer. And at the end, there's people reminiscing about it. I think Geraldo has the right idea that it is better now. But there's some people, there's a guy who's like, there's no life to this. I want to see the whores on 42nd Street. I mean, I get maybe it's this Wild West romantic quality you have on things back then. But it's like if people are in their comfort zone long enough, then they want something a bit different. But then when you get that taste of reality, you go, you know what, actually, it's a taste of reality, but I don't want to live it. I actually want to be back here again. Like there are people, oh, I wish I could go back to the Wild West. Why? So you could take a dump and maybe get dysentery, and if you look at someone wrong, they pull a gun out and shoot you in the face, and worry about all sorts of disease and heat and Native Americans or bad cowboys trying to rob you or steal you or scalp you, or people like Wild Bill Hickok shooting you and killing you, and the cowboys being rustling and cornholing your holes, all of them. Well, I don't know if they did that a lot. You never know. I'm like, there's fantasy, there's reality. There's a big difference between the two. Like I said, the more interesting stuff to me was about the city and everything around the music. The music was okay to listen to. Like I said, some people like Grandmaster Caz. There's some fun stories in there. But it's like everything around the music. Again, the mayor race, the Son of Sam, the heat wave, the blackouts, the graffiti, how dangerous it was back then. So it's a nice window through time to how things were back in the day. That was the most interesting bit with all the old footage they got in there and incorporated in. Very tightly packed, edited documentary. Definitely think it's worth a watch. Like I said, I do wish it was a bit longer. I wish certain things were elongated, like the graffiti part and other stuff. But overall, like this was a fun documentary to watch. And like I said, you find it for free on YouTube. For those watching, thank you, and we'll see you guys later. Bye bye for now.